Hello everyone and welcome back to the CarPod. So today's episode is going to be about IB Spanish. So IB Spanish is one of the two languages offered here at Hoover for IB students, and it is a standard level class, so it's only 1 year. And I'm actually currently in this class, and we brought one of our friends, one of our classmates, Mary, to come talk with us about this class. So Mary, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi guys, my name is Mary Sullivan. I'm currently a 12th grader with the class of 2023, and I am an IB diploma candidate.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about why you chose to do IB?
So going into high school, I knew I wanted to push myself academically, and I was kind of a copycat. 4 years ago, I just did everything my older sister was doing, and so she was an IB. But I ultimately decided to stay within the program because of this small class environment. I felt like the teachers had more time to focus on you as a student, and they really saw you as more than a grade. And you also got super close with all your classmates, so it really felt like one big family, and I really enjoyed coming to school every day despite the classes being rigorous.
So do you want to talk a little bit about your CAS and your EE since you are a diploma student?
Yes, of course. So I'm in the Law Academy, and that's one of my passions. So I really wanted to focus both of those kind of in that field. So for my EE, my guiding question was, what were the founding fathers, the intentions behind the Second Amendment? You know, was it a personal right, or was it solely for the militia? And so that was really interesting and very fascinating for me, since constitutional law is something I enjoy. And then for my CAS project, I still wanted to keep it in kind of the world of politics and law. So I actually created a website called Hoover Votes, where you can quickly register to vote on, as well as learn about all of the positions you can vote someone into on both a local and national level. And there's also some other pages that kind of talk about the importance of voting and why you should ultimately vote when you turn 18.
We'll leave a link in either the comments or the description of this video to the website, so y'all can go check it out. It's really cool. Mary did a really good job with that.
Thank you.
So, I guess we should jump into Spanish. So, first, do you want to talk about maybe, like, what exactly are we learning in Spanish and, like, how the class is structured?
So what I found last year, it was a little bit weird because the first half, we were wearing masks, we were still kind of dealing with COVID, but you really start to put your Spanish to use, and you learn about a lot of Spanish-speaking countries and their culture. You learn more than just how to speak Spanish, which I really loved, because once you begin to understand the culture, you appreciate the class a lot more. And I would say the class, it's very heavy with speaking in Spanish. I don't think there were many times where we were speaking in English. So it's really just putting everything you've learned the past 3 years and putting it into practice. So when you go out into the real world, you kind of know what you're dealing with and how to apply what you've learned. So it's a lot of class discussions, a lot of reading, and so I just loved it because of that. And Miss Senora White is phenomenal. So if you ever go into Spanish 4 or IB Spanish and you don't think that you're ready, I promise you, Senora will get you prepared.
Yes, because I feel like with COVID cut off the most pivotal year in Spanish, at least in my opinion. And I feel like there's like this huge gap in my knowledge, but the progression that I've made from like the beginning of this year to now is like insane. She's amazing.
Yeah, because both my freshman and sophomore year were affected by COVID. So I remember the first day of junior year, Senora actually wasn't there because she had COVID, but I emailed her and I said, Senora, I don't think I'm prepared for this class. I don't think I remember anything from the past 2 years. Are there any links or websites I can use to kind of help prep me for this upcoming year? And she just responded back saying, you know what, I understand, and don't worry, I have you covered. And she really, upheld her word, and she made sure that we were all prepared for the IO. And I came out of that class feeling like I actually understood how to speak Spanish, which I didn't feel my freshman and sophomore year.
So I haven't taken this test, or class, not test. Oh, I'm sorry. So do you want to like talk a little bit about like how the class works, like any kind of like assignments, like what y'all do like on a weekly basis in that class?
So we really used the textbook a lot, which was a little odd for me because I hadn't had a class at that point where we really relied on the textbook. At least that's how we did it kind of in the COVID years. And you would read through it, and there would be a lot of questions to answer, whether they're multiple choice or free response. And you'd put that into a Google form, and that'd kind of be like a classroom assignment. And then you'd usually come back and we'd have class discussions on the topic. But one thing I loved is that you also had research opportunities. You know, if we weren't using the textbook or learning basic grammar, she would give us a topic about some aspect of a country's culture, and you would research about it and then present to the class on your findings. And so it taught you how to put together a proper presentation and then present it while speaking Spanish. So it's a lot of reading and answering questions, and then a few opportunities to conduct research.
So Spanish is kind of like English in that there's not an IA really, but instead you have an IO. So do you want to talk about
in a couple weeks? Oh my goodness.
Do you want to talk about like the Spanish IO?
Yeah, so the IO is the one thing that made me not want to take IB Spanish, because how it works is it's basically putting together all you've learned in the past year about culture and grammar rules into just one examination. And so you go in there and your teacher, Miss Senora, will present you with a picture, and you are given a few minutes to kind of collect your thoughts. And then after those few minutes are up, you then have to describe the picture to her, what's going on, and then you have to connect the picture to your personal life as well as to some other culture in a Spanish-speaking country. And I believe my picture was it was like a really messy room, which was so on brand for me because I'm one of 7 kids, so our house is very messy. So I talked about in Spanish about how the picture kind of represented my family, and then I went in about how my family was Catholic and all of that, and then I connected my family being Catholic to how that's kind of a main religion in a lot of these Spanish-speaking countries. And you do that for about 10 minutes, and then after 10 minutes, she'll stop you and she'll spend 5 minutes asking you questions, whether that is to elaborate on something or if you said something earlier that she wanted you to kind of either correct or, again, elaborate on. So it's not as scary as it sounds because the pictures are usually related to you, but it is 15 minutes of talking in Spanish, which can be a little scary.
Yeah, what she told us was that, like, let's say you freeze up and you only talk for, like, 3 or 4 minutes. It's basically a conversation after that point with her, so, like, she will help move you along. She's not going to leave you hanging there.
Yeah, and she was fantastic. I went in there super nervous, but then ended up halfway through talking about how my great-grandmother was a girl boss. And I did not know I was capable of speaking that way in Spanish, but the words were just coming out of my mouth. And Senora apparently understood what I was saying because she loved it. So she's an amazing teacher, and I would say that's one reason why you do so well on the IO is because of the way she prepares you, and also the fact that you get to talk to her. You know her. You kind of are able to pick out what she's saying since you've been with her for almost a year.
So you kind of talked about this already a little bit, but how do you feel like your fluency improved throughout the year?
I would say it improved a lot because I started using it outside of the classroom. I am a Sunday school teacher at my church, and I do have some kids in my class who do speak English, but they're more comfortable with speaking Spanish, and I was able to communicate with these kids, and I felt more confident being able to do so. Even though it was not very, like, complicated sentences I was saying, I was still able to have that confidence boost to communicate with them, which is something that would not have happened sophomore year. So because of the group discussions and the research projects and presentations, I felt like that really aided to me being able to do that outside of school.
Yeah, that's really cool. So again, you kind of like talked about this a little bit, how y'all like worked really hard in class. So how about out of class? How did you really study for Spanish and like the grammar and vocabulary?
So Senora did give us a lot of like websites that were kind of like game based that we could use for grammar. My sister also took IB Spanish her junior year, and she's 1 grade above me. So I did speak a lot with her. I did have that opportunity to be able to practice it at home. But sometimes if I was in my room and I wanted to prep for a presentation, I just talked to myself in Spanish. I tried, whenever I was thinking to myself while doing homework, I tried to do it in Spanish because that's really at the end of the day, the only way you're going to be able to remember what you learn if you practice it outside the classroom. So I would literally, like, really forget studying online. Just practicing it with another individual or saying stuff out loud to yourself is really what's going to push you ahead in that class.
I do that too sometimes. Like when I'm around the house.
Yeah.
Like, I speak like this broken Spanglish. It's so weird. Like I'll try talking to my mom and like I'll use half Spanish, half English. She's like, I don't know what you're saying.
Yeah, but then you don't realize how much it still helps you until you get back into the classroom. And you're a lot more confident with what you say. Because I think what is it, Spanish 3 is what it's called? Or was it, no, it was Spanish 3, my sophomore year. I did not like talking in that class at all. And I already have the worst pronunciation in English, so I was like, there's no way I'm going to pronounce these words right in Spanish. So I did not participate in that class very often. But once I got to Spanish 4, it was a completely different environment. And since I practiced a lot outside the house, I felt like I progressed a lot more in that class.
It's always funny to me because, like, since I'm in Latin, I don't understand all of your Spanish stuff, even though Spanish comes from Latin. I always find it funny when y'all are talking in Spanish, and I'm like, okay, cool, funny, yeah. So, what was your favorite theme?
Oh, yeah.
What are the themes? What is that?
Charlie, you're going to have to help me out with this.
It's experiencias, ingenio humano, compartir de la planeta, or something like that, identidades, and organización social. So, experiences, identities, human ingenuity, caring for the planet, and what was the other one? Oh, social organization. Yeah.
I remember doing those. Couldn't remember them off the top of my head, but from what you said, I think identity was probably my favorite because I do remember a lot of the discussions of culture coming out of that, and also being able to kind of discuss yourself, being able to talk about who you are as a person, but being able to express that in Spanish. I think the biggest thing was probably just learning about other individuals and culture. That was always very cool for me because it wasn't as so much a Spanish class anymore. It was like very much like history oriented. Yeah. And I really love that because history is one of my favorite classes.
Yeah, I feel like, especially with experiences and human ingenuity, it was really easy to connect because human ingenuity, most of what we do is art and literature.
I did love that one.
I love that one because we talked about like Frida Kahlo, we talked about Dali, Picasso. Like we talked about all these really famous Latino and Hispanic artists, and we got to look at like these museums and all that stuff. It was so cool.
Yeah, that was really cool for me because I've never had a class before that focused on art.
Yeah. And
so to be able to learn about these individuals and the impact that they made on society was very cool. And because I didn't go into Spanish 4, IB Spanish, thinking that I would learn anything like that. I thought it was very much going to be just grammar and speaking. But you go in there and you learn a lot about, individuals and artwork and all these organizations, and it's just a really cool experience.
I like the experiences too because we talked about holidays. It was interesting because, like you said, most of these Latino and Hispanic countries are Catholic, and so as a Catholic, it's so interesting to see how they celebrate these holidays different than like American Catholics do. Yeah,
I remember mentioning that in my IO about kind of like when you talked about the differences between your culture and another culture. I talked about the differences between how Catholicism is practiced and how that was really eye-opening for me to realize some of the stuff stuff is placed on in one church and how it's a little bit different in another. So that was pretty cool because I always grew up thinking that, the Catholic Church was very structured and everybody did the same thing and had the same traditions. The church is still very structured, but I kind of learned that the traditions and how they're celebrated may vary, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and there's all those types of connections, like, that you can make between those themes. Like, she literally forces you to make those connections because they're an integral part of the IO. So, like, you may not, like, listening to this, you may not be Catholic, you're like, oh, I don't have a connection, but trust me.
You'll find a connection.
You will be connected in some way.
Yeah.
So, I guess the other, like, big assessment is the exam, obviously. So, do you want to talk about the different parts of the exam, how you felt about the exam, all that?
So if I remember correctly, because usually when I take exams, I try to block everything out afterwards. But you practice a lot for it ahead of time, just to make note of that. But one of them was you're given kind of like a question. It's like a paper response. And I remember mine was about, like, and you have to, like, connect it to culture and connect it to yourself. And you had to write, like, a diary entry or whatever type of writing they asked you to. And I think in that case it was a diary entry. And I wrote about a silent concert. And I talked about the differences between, like, how silent concerts you can see some of that in churches, because again I was relating it back to Catholicism as, like, that connection. And I talked about how some churches have those type of parties, but my church doesn't, and I know some churches in Spanish speaking countries don't do that. And so you just kind of basically a diary entry using the guiding question. And then there's another paper where you're given articles and you read through the articles and you answer questions about them. That one I thought was probably the most difficult, because you're timed and you're trying to answer all these questions about the articles, and you may not understand some of the words, but I got through it and I did pretty well. And then you have the listening section. I don't even know how to explain that because it was a mess for everyone, because the audio was very, like, shaky. You couldn't really understand what the person was saying, not because they were talking fast, because of the quality of the audio. And I think it was partly the speaker and also partly IB. But the person talks and there's going to be multiple choice about, like, what the person said, kind of like fill in the blank, a variety of that. So those are the 3 sections you take. For me personally, I thought the article one was probably the hardest, probably because I was under the pressure of time. The free response for the guiding question was pretty easy, because you have control over it, and the listening isn't too hard as long as, the quality isn't that bad. But they do scale exams, so I think if they realize that everybody did not do good on the listening, I think they kind of understand that there may have been an issue, so they scale the exams, and I think everybody that I know of did pretty well.
So, I guess, do you have any, like, tips or tricks for
being
Spanish?
successful in this class?
Like, I know you talked about studying and using it outside class, but
I think as a high schooler, you really want to try to take shortcuts with your assignments, and you don't want to put in 100% of your best, and you want to find the answers. I would say for Spanish, if you want to be successful, don't do that. Because when you get the answers, or you don't put 100% of your best effort into an assignment, you're cheating yourself out of getting a good score on the end of the year exam. So if you really want to become fluent, you need to do all the assignments, actually read the readings that she assigns you, and practice at home. Because for Spanish, it really isn't a class where you can come out of it, like, knowing everything 100% without actually putting 100% into the class. It's not like, history, where you can kind of get the gist of things by not doing without doing all the reading. So just 100% of your best. That's how you're going to do well in the class. And it's not a lot. I don't want people to think, oh my gosh, I have to do everything now. I'm going to be so stressed by this class. Senora is, like, one of the best teachers ever, Senora White. She is so understanding that we have other stuff going on in our life, so she does not pile you up with assignments. And the stuff she does give you, like, she's going to make sure that you know how to do it. And everything she does give you, it's for a reason. It's beneficial. So don't just, like, brush it off as if, oh, this isn't necessary. Do it and give it 100% of your best.
Yeah, I agree. And also, like Mary said, what is that? Sorry. There's more proof that we're sitting in the car. I'm looking through the what is this, sunroof, yeah. But like Mary said earlier, this class is very discussion based. So participate, even if you feel like your Spanish is broken, or like you don't really have the words that you think that you need. Still talk, because she will help you, and you'll find that your understanding of Spanish and your writing ability and your listening ability gets so much better by doing that. And also, like, when it comes to learning new words and stuff, this is just something I do, which, I mean, is not required. Like, she does not require you to do this, but when we have, like, articles to read, whether they're on paper or in, like, on the Chromebook or something, I will highlight words that I don't know and look them up, because that just adds them, to your vocabulary, and now when you see them, you're like, oh, I know that word, that's really helped build my vocabulary as well, and it's, like, 5 extra minutes out of, like, your time doing your homework, so it's, I would suggest that too.
Yeah, never be embarrassed of your level of Spanish or ability to speak it, because there were definitely kids in my class last year who could speak it very well, who had been taking Spanish for the exact amount of years that I had it, but just were much farther ahead because they practiced it a lot more outside of school. But don't be embarrassed by that. I would say instead kind of take advantage of having those people in your class and learn from them. You know, try to have more conversations with them in Spanish, because they're going to be able to help you and correct you. And it's kind of like that idea, like when you're around people, you start to pick up on their vocabulary and the words they use. Like, I find myself, like, saying things that, like, I thought only my mom would say because I hang out with her so much. And it's kind of like that with learning Spanish. Like, when you're around these people so much and you start hearing them use, you know, certain, like, applying certain grammar rules or using certain vocabulary rules, you start to understand it, and you're able to pick up on it. You're able to understand people speaking at that speed. So take advantage of it. Don't be embarrassed that you're kind of behind. I promise you, like, half the class is. You know, we've all been through COVID. Even if you haven't experienced COVID yet in your high school years, don't be embarrassed by that, but just take advantage of the people around you.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
So one thing that I find like really unique about our school system in Spanish is that we offer it in 8th grade, and then you can get credit for it freshman year. And so that meant you're able to take it junior year, or you
Instead of
take
senior
IB
year,
junior. Yeah. So are you taking AP Spanish, or you were thinking about it? And
I
decided...
was thinking about it. I really wanted to take it, but I didn't have any room in my schedule. Because from talking to counselors, they just thought it would be more beneficial if I had an extra year of math for colleges to see on my transcript instead of Spanish. And the other reason why I just decided to take math over Spanish was because I knew I still had many opportunities outside of school to practice my Spanish, because, you know, at my church, I have the kids I can speak to, and my mom also has friends that are very happy to help me practice my Spanish. And I knew I probably didn't have that with math. So I probably needed to stay in school with math to make sure I don't forget it before college. But I was pretty confident that I could still maintain my Spanish-speaking skills before college.
Yeah. So taking a 5th year Spanish is still an option. So
It is.
Yeah.
And I know...
That's really nice for...
Yeah, I know some people who do take it, and they really love it. I think the classroom setup is a little bit different than IB. Kind of the focus of the class. I'm not too informed on it all, but I've never heard my friends say anything bad about the class. They really love it. So it's a great opportunity if you want to continue with your Spanish. 4 years on your transcript already looks really impressive. So if you're confident that you can maintain your Spanish speaking skills, and there's another class you think that you really need before college, just go ahead and take that other class. But if you don't have like the access to those opportunities that like I have, I'd probably recommend staying in Spanish.
Yeah, and I mean, that's another AP credit.
Yeah.
You know, another possible college credit. So, I mean, there's also that benefit, too.
It's kind of like taking, from what I've been told, IB Spanish again, except you don't have to do the IO. So, you know, you're learning stuff that's kind of similar to what you learned last year. So it's not as challenging as you think an AP class would be, but you're still learning new things. So it's not like it's a waste of your time. You're still learning a lot of new things. I think it's very focused on reading. So if that's something you really want to better yourself at, then that's a class to take.
Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts about, like, maybe even the Spanish department as a whole?
I would say stick through Spanish. If you're a freshman listening to this and you're wanting to drop, you know, a class, don't drop your Spanish class. Even if you don't plan on being an IB diploma student, I think it's still very beneficial to stick through the program and even take IB Spanish. I know it's open to non-IB diploma students. So take the class. It's very beneficial. And the stuff you learn, it's really going to help you get into some colleges that you've dreamed of getting into, and also just in the real world applying this. If you ever run into someone, you're able to communicate with them. And it makes you stand out, especially on an application, whether that's for college or for a job.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, also, if you're an IB diploma student, you have to take the same language.
Yeah.
Over the course of 4 years for you to get your diploma. Like, you can't switch from Latin or French or whatever other languages Hoover offers to Spanish and then expect to get the diploma. So that's also something to think about if you're shooting for the IB diploma.
Mm-hmm. And if you're in, like, 8th grade trying to decide, go listen to the Latin podcast, too.
Yes, because we have that up, too.
Another IB option. So.
And don't think you need to be, like, the best Spanish speaker ever to be able to do IB Spanish and get an A in the class. I went through Spanish during COVID years, if that does not speak for itself. I was not learning much Spanish at all. Not the teacher's fault. It was they were doing their absolute best, but it's very hard to learn Spanish through a virtual setting when you don't get to actually communicate with your fellow classmates. So don't be discouraged, because if I went through like 2 years of COVID Spanish and still got an A in IB Spanish, then you can too. So please just put yourself out there and try it, because I promise you there's a lot of benefits behind taking the class.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other general thoughts about IB? We got plenty of time. As president, do you have any
Co-president of our IB council.
Yeah.
I would honestly say, like, if there's any sophomores watching this and you're on the edge about doing, like, IB diploma versus IB courses, there's probably a podcast on that, is there?
No.
Okay,
No.
then
We've been, like,
maybe.
focusing on the classes.
let me cover it now. I would say just put yourself out there and do IB diploma, because you'd rather step up and then have to step down if something's too hard than not being able to step up, if that makes sense. Like, doing IB diploma, if it's too hard, you can step down to IB courses, but if you're in IB courses, you can't really step up to IB diploma. So if you're like, IB Spanish is not for me, that's okay. Guess what? You can step down to IB. I keep wanting to say AP courses. IB courses. So just put yourself out there. Try IB diploma. Take a chance. Because when I was a freshman and I remember them talking about IB diploma, I was like, oh, I'm not doing that. Yeah. There's no way I'm getting an A in that class. Same. And then come sophomore year, I'm very thankful for Ms. Hamley for this, because she kind of made me do IB diploma. It was in a very subtle way too. I came out of the meeting and was like, whoa, did she just like sign me up for IB diploma? I was like talking about wanting to take like a marine biology class, and she's like, no, I don't think you should be in that class. Let's do IB biology. And the next thing you know, I'm having to sign up for another IB class for me to do diploma. And next thing you know, I'm in the diploma program, and I'm very happy that had happened, because just the environment that you, and just everything you receive from the program in its entirety.
I think slaying at it too.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Makes it really unique. And I wouldn't say that it's like very time consuming. That was my other fear, that I wouldn't be able to do all the other extracurriculars that I loved. But you can balance. I promise. If I can balance, you can balance. Let me tell you. I do a lot of stuff, especially with law, and I've been able to do all that stuff and then come back home and do well in all my classes, because like I said earlier, the teachers really care about who you are as an individual and see you well beyond a grade that they have to put into power school. Is that what we use now? Yeah, it's not I now. I wanted to say I now for a second. But so they want to work with you. They want you to succeed, and they want to push you to make sure you reach your full potential. And so I think that's something that's very unique about IB that it's hard to find in other classes. And I'm not saying that other like non-IB teachers don't care about you. It's just a lot harder for them to have that like one-on-one kind of academic relationship with you, because some of these teachers, bless their heart, have like 200 kids they have to deal with every day. Like, it's hard for them. And being a teacher is rough, especially after coming out of COVID. But because IB is so small, it did allow the IB teachers to still maintain that academic one-on-one relationship with you to make sure you succeed.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to say something, I forgot what it was.
Yeah, I think that's really
it.
good. Yeah, that about covers it.
Okay. Mary, thank you so much for joining us.
course.
We really appreciate it.
Of course.
And thank you so much, everyone who's listening or watching this. We usually have them comment an emoji if they're listening to on YouTube. So what emoji should they comment?
I was talking to Ashika about this the other day. I said, Apple really needs to make a dabbing emoji, because I just be so on
That
brand
would be the
for
only
me.
emoji you use.
I would be telling someone like, oh, I'm so sorry you're having a bad week, dab emoji. Like, that would be me in every single situation, and I feel like it would get me into so much trouble. But what's something that's kind of as cool as a dab emoji?
I don't know if there's anything as cool as a dab emoji.
Let me go through my most used emoji list, because there's definitely ones that I use. Let me see. Oh my gosh, the cat emojis, any cat emoji will do. I live for those. Like the cat emoji where it looks shocked and its mouth is open and its like paws are on its hand. I love that one. I send that anytime my dad says something to me. I'm kind of like making fun of him, and I'll send him a cat emoji. Or I'll send it to like literally anyone in my family. So do a cat emoji. Anyone will be fine.
Yeah.
comment a cat emoji.
I hope non-Apple people have a cat emoji.
I know. That would be kind of... Anyway, it's okay, though. They can comment. I'm sure there's a
Comment
cat
something.
somehow.
Comment the
Just-
word cat.
Anything
Yeah.
cat related, go for it.
Okay.
Sadly, there isn't a dab emoji.
Right. I think we should start a petition for Apple to make a dab emoji.
Of course.
Yeah. I would totally sign it.
Oh yeah.
I could help them design it too.
Yeah.
For sure.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Thank you again so much,
Of
Mary.
course.
And thanks again, everyone, for listening to this episode. And we will see y'all in the next one.